Now it's time to introduce the next speaker. This is Dr. Dayalu, or Dayalu is actually how you pronounce it. I apologize. Dr. Dayalu is a clinical associate professor in neurology at the University of Michigan. He cares for patients with a wide range of movement disorders and has ongoing research projects in multiple system atrophy, which is one of those conditions that mimics Parkinson's disease. He also directs the clinical training of our movement disorders fellows and is very active with medical education at all levels. So please welcome to the podium Dr. Dayalu, and he'll be talking about fatigue in Parkinson's disease.
Okay, so the topic is fatigue, obviously in the context of Parkinson's disease, but show of hands, how many people here have ever had a time in their life where they had a bit of a problem with fatigue? Okay. Now, if I then went around the room and asked people what they meant by that, what do you mean by fatigue? What did you feel when you say that you were fatigued at that time in your life? I would probably get 10 different types of answers as to what the feeling was. So that's the first point here. You know, if someone says, I feel fatigued or I feel tired, and they've got Parkinson's, one of the first things that the doctor will ask is, well, what do you mean by that? And so it's kind of useful if you're one of those folks who thinks, yeah, I deal with fatigue, to try to think about it a little bit more and articulate what it is that you really mean by fatigue. Maybe you might use the word tired or low energy, or maybe what you mean by that is that you feel that your muscles are weak when you're fatigued, or that your movements are slower, you're not as physically effective. Maybe it might mean I just don't feel motivated to do anything when I'm fatigued. It might mean I just want to go to bed, or I'm sleepy, or I'm so sleepy that I just nod off, I can't stay awake. Fatigue could also mean I'm tired, not just tired, but I'm kind of sick and tired in a psychological sense. I'm fed up, I'm down, I feel worthless, I feel hopeless, kind of mood symptoms, depression. And fatigue can also mean I'm off. My medication has worn off, and it's a medication-related thing. It's just a lousy feeling that happens when my meds are down and I can't function as well. Or it can be any combination of these. So trying to put it in a box, if we can, is a good place to start. And you know, when I raise my hand and say I had a period in my life where I was quite fatigued, it would have been the first year after I had my second kid, because I was still dealing with the first. I was sleep deprived, I was extremely busy, and so it was a combination for me of sleep deprivation and not wanting to do things that I needed to do. I didn't feel motivated to do more than what I had to do for that 1 year. But it was a bit of a problem until it got better. So let's talk about treatable fatigue. And the more we can try to put it into a box, the more we can say, your doctor can say, oh, okay, if that's maybe what this is, let's try treating that problem and see if this fatigue gets better. So the big boxes that have their own treatments are some kind of sleep problem, some kind of mood problem, a motor physical dopamine problem, as Dr. Snyder was referring to, wearing off. And then there's just being deconditioned, being out of shape, sort of generally not being in good shape, which we have various ways of addressing. And then finally, let's not forget that just because you have Parkinson's and you have fatigue maybe doesn't mean the two are related. And so it's really important for your primary doctor to also be aware of this if it's a problem, and think about, well, do you just have a hormone imbalance from your thyroid? Or, well, if you're fatigued and what you mean is you can't walk a few blocks because you get winded and you get short of breath, no, shortness of breath should not be, that's not something we pin on Parkinson's. If you're walking a block or two and getting short of breath, could you have a heart problem or a lung problem? And that could be the cause of that kind of fatigue. And so, and your, any other medical problems. If you're diabetic, is your blood sugar well regulated? Are you on the right kinds of medications, et cetera? So let's kind of go over each of these by turn, and these have, to some degree, been touched at already by Dr. Snyder. So if you think about so I'll start, before I dive into this, I will say that fatigue as a general report is very common in people with Parkinson's disease, and much of the time we can try to parse it into one of these boxes, but sometimes we can't. So there are times when people have fatigue that doesn't fit into any of these boxes, and they just don't know what it's hard to explain why they feel so tired, and I'll come to that at the end. But if your fatigue is just a feeling of sleepiness, is your fatigue, does your fatigue make you have a hard time staying awake or want to actually take a nap? Then you should probably look at your medications. Are you on a medication that could be making you sleepy? You can ask your doctor that specifically. Are any of these drugs making me drowsy? Do you have a sleep problem? And insomnia, trouble falling asleep, trouble staying asleep? You can talk to your bed partner to see if they notice anything unusual about your breathing, heavy snoring. They may notice things that you don't that are kind of causing odd behaviors at night and are not giving your brain good sleep, suggestive of sleep apnea. Or does your bladder drive you nuts all night and make you wake up and go to the bathroom over and over? So these are all things that we have different tricks up our sleeve to try to improve and address, but that's the sleep part. And of course, let's not forget sleep hygiene, as Dr. Snyder mentioned. Optimizing sleep, not staying up too late with your on-screen device and looking at it and bombarding your brain with light at midnight when you should be going to bed. So these are some basic things about sleep. Well, maybe your fatigue is more in a combination with a mood problem. So feeling sad, feeling down, feeling blue, feeling worthless and hopeless, just not enjoying things. If some or all of that sounds like it might be an issue for you, time to talk to your doctor about whether you might have depression. And depression is very common, and it's a treatable problem. That doesn't mean that we have a quick and easy fix for depression. There are medications, there's talk therapy, there's a bit of both. But as Dr. Snyder mentioned, depression can be sort of a part of the brain changes in Parkinson's disease. And we have a way to address it. You just have to bring it up. Depression is, of course, tends to be a little bit harder for men to talk about. So feeling sad or acknowledging the possibility of depression, feeling worthless and hopeless. In particular, sometimes spouses of men will say, hey, I think, Joe here might be depressed, and here's why, and we rely on that kind of input too. The other thing that comes up when we talk about depression, as mentioned by Dr. Snyder, is apathy, which is just the feeling that a person does not initiate as much as they do before. They just don't care about going out and starting new things or doing a routine during the day. And that's not necessarily the same as depression, but it can be interpreted as fatigue. So I've had a few patients where their spouse says, they're always, they're content to sit there and not do much, and they have the same kind of expression on their face, and they don't get up and start things. And I think they're tired all the time. Well, that's a situation where I will talk to the patient and say, what do you feel? Are you sad? Are you depressed? No. What do you feel when you're sitting there? I don't know, neutral, kind of neutral. And so that may not be the same thing as depression or as fatigue, but it's a behavioral change that we see in some people with Parkinson's. And the best way to address that probably is just to try to give gentle cues to get the person to do something. And a lot of folks with mild to moderate apathy will respond to, hey, let's go do this. Oh, okay. But some people, it's really hard to get them to do stuff. Medications are an important cause of just tiredness or fatigue, and if they cause sleepiness and drowsiness. On the flip side, does your fatigue relate to a time of the day? You know, does it go up and down through the day? If so, maybe it's related to the dopamine in your brain dropping down, and that's when you feel more fatigued. And if you've noticed that, then the way to try to address that is to basically address the Parkinson's medications. And sometimes it's a little hard to know that, but you know, you could try to pay attention to that more. And then there's this. There's no, it's not that. It's just, I just am out of energy. I'm just tired. It's not something people can see visibly. It's not a depression. I'm not falling asleep. But just getting through the day is a Herculean effort, and I don't know why. And this is a problem for a good number of people. So there's a lot of studies that have looked at this phenomenon, pure fatigue in Parkinson's disease, and tried to define it, try to see how common it is. And you know, the one large study that I looked at from a year ago suggested that a third of people with Parkinson's disease have had at some point fatigue to the point where that was distressing. They could not, it was really affecting their day-to-day life. And so when this happens, we don't know exactly where in the brain it comes from. We can't just blame it on dopamine, because they're on dopaminergic therapy, and people who are on high doses of medicine or lower doses have this problem. We are studying it more. There's been an increasing awareness of this as a separate problem, and scientists internationally are trying to define this better, come up with a way to first know exactly what this is, so that when we do research studies to address it, we know whether people are clearly responding or not, and what's the way to kind of track that. You know, it'd be great if there was a quick fix pill for this. There isn't. There has been not one single solid study that showed, oh, if you've just got low energy, take this or use this drug, and that will improve your energy levels. And I think this, to some degree, holds for fatigue in general, in the general public. I mean, fatigue is more common in individuals as they age. Parkinson's disease tends to be more common in middle-aged to older people. And even if you look at older adults without Parkinson's disease, many of them say, I just have less energy than I used to. So there's an interaction here with just getting older. So how do we deal with it? I mean, so sometimes in people with disabling fatigue, we will try stimulant-type medications. And these are things like methylphenidate or Ritalin. But my personal feeling is I've used this just a handful of times on people with just overwhelming fatigue just to try something, and I have not had very good success with it. I can't think of anybody I have. Maybe I think of one person who is on Ritalin who feels that that's actually improved their fatigue somewhat, and even that person is still fatigued. I think there are things that we can do to try to fight it that are lifestyle-based. What we know is that if you've got a problem with fatigue, it's not going to help if you stay at home and just sit. That will definitely make it worse. It will feed into a vicious cycle of you having less energy and more tired. You'll also get physical deconditioning on top of that, and it's more likely to worsen mood problems. So I think step one is to try to do a little bit of activity, and that's better than none. And so if you have a good time during your day where you tend to feel more energetic, strike while the iron's hot, get out of the house, you know, a simple meeting with a friend or you know, a simple errand or a little hobby work or something like that, or going for a walk. Getting whatever exercise you can is good. Exercise probably improves fatigue, but people with fatigue who feel like they have a lot of difficulty with motivation find it hard to get motivated to do the exercise. And so we think about, well, sit down with your family and your doctor and strategize what are ways to try to kind of up the ante on getting you to go exercise. Sometimes it could be family members going together and saying, let's go for a walk together. That can help. Or sometimes it could be putting money down and saying, okay, let's sign up for this particular, you know, water aerobics class or something like that. Well, we've paid $50 for it. Now you're probably more likely to go and do it. And I had one patient who did that, and then they started going for the water aerobics classes, and they found, wait, my energy levels are a lot better. I feel better after doing this, and now I'm going to put down $50 every couple of months and in advance of the class, and I'll go. So that's something to keep in mind. There's natural stimulants, of course. Caffeine's a big one. Caffeine, I've had a couple of patients who have somewhat increased their caffeine intake as a way of treating fatigue. You got to be careful with this because you don't want to take too much caffeine late in the day where it can mess with your sleep. But there are some forms of caffeine that are gentler that you could probably drink a little more frequently. I think green tea is an example. I've had a couple of patients who you know, do a couple of bags of green tea during the day and feels it gives them a little bit of an extra push. So that's something you can try. But you know, this is still a work in progress. I think I will say this as kind of as much of a downer of a topic it is, it's being addressed. It's the community, the Parkinson's disease community now is much more in touch with this than it was, you know, 5, 10 years ago, which is nice. So I will stop and take questions. The question is, does adrenal function, can it cause fatigue if it's off? It can. Adrenal dysfunction is much less common than thyroid dysfunction. And adrenal dysfunction usually causes other symptoms, electrolyte problems, blood pressure problems. And so we don't, you know, it's something that your primary doc, you could ask a primary doctor about it, and a general medicine doc knows more about that than a neurologist. But it's pretty rare usually. Yeah, so the question was, you know, if a person identifies that they are perhaps more fatigued when their muscles are stiffer and more painful, that would bring to my mind, well, is this fatigue is it related to the Parkinson's physical symptoms being under less optimal control? And so the question I would ask is, do those symptoms all come on more together? Do they fluctuate? Do they come on more at the end of the dose? And if the answer is probably, then maybe, or even if you're not sure, then maybe trying a higher dose of dopaminergic therapy might help. Or the other thing which I haven't mentioned is, which we've talked about exercise, but also physical therapy. So for folks who just generally feel more deconditioned and they're not performing at a higher level, but their meds seem to be okay, sometimes we'll use physical therapy as a way of kind of tuning them up to better function overall, building up their stamina. That's a great question. The question is, what about the role of naps, for example? And napping is normal for, you know, most societies. People nap. And so I think that if you feel that a nap in the afternoon is something that could help you, and I think it's on the list of things to try. The thing to be careful about is naps should probably be made a little bit more routine, as opposed to, you know, I see some folks who there are some days where they take a nap in the morning and then they take another nap at 6 in the evening, and then that throws them off and they don't fall asleep until 1 a.m. and then they only sleep for 5 hours, and once again they're taking little mini naps during the day, and now you're just not functioning on a normal schedule, and it's not helping you. So a better strategy would be to try to optimize your sleep at night during reasonable hours and take a short nap during the afternoon. There is a low point, or around before and after 2 p.m. or 2:30, and that may be a time to try a short nap. And there's certainly nothing wrong with that, and it can help for some folks. Other things that I haven't specifically mentioned, which that just reminded me of, folks sometimes ask, well, what about, energy booster or supplement X or vitamins or something like that from the health food store? They'll make all sorts of claims. They don't need to vet those claims. So if you're getting a product from the health food store and it says it does all this stuff, they're allowed to say whatever they want about what it does. And so you're just really taking it on faith, and they want to sell you a product. So there's no evidence that there is any product out there, even a multivitamin, and most of us have a reasonably balanced, get all the nutrition we need through our diet. There's no evidence that any of these products boosts energy. And so sometimes they can be quite expensive. I would think, diet is an important consideration too. There are some dietary habits that could probably sap energy. And so if you're eating a carbohydrate-rich meal, like a big stack of potatoes or something like that, well, that hits your bloodstream, turns into sugar, basically, and then your body dumps out of a lot of insulin, and then the sugar level surges, and then it drops, and that kind of fluctuation alone can make people without Parkinson's feel fatigued. So I know this for myself. I just feel a lot more tired if I have a highly starchy carbohydrate meal. So just be careful what you eat. Make sure you get lots of vegetables in. Make sure you get whole grains. And sometimes dietary modifications, avoiding just processed sugar and pop and stuff like that, can help. Sir? Vitamin B, people take B vitamins. If you, generally speaking, don't have a GI problem and you get a normal diet, you eat, 2 reasonable meals a day, and you have a balance between animal products and plant products, etc., you are very likely getting all the vitamins you need from your diet. Now, some individuals particularly older individuals, may have a deficiency in vitamin B12. And even with their diet being rich, they may not be absorbing it well enough. And so of all the B vitamins in the general American public, that's the one that's most likely to be deficient. And that can cause a variety of neurologic symptoms, including contribute to confusion. And so that may be one to potentially have your doctor check. But if that's normal, I think taking B vitamins is rarely going to be the solution to this problem. Yeah, taking shots. I mean, usually people who are taking shots for a B vitamin have been found to be deficient, usually B12. Difference between water therapy and water aerobics, and what's the role in Parkinson's, maybe? Why did I mention that? I think that the reason why I mentioned water aerobics, and you were asking about that, is kind of what you were referring to. So water therapy is a little bit of a change. It's, for many people, find it nice and relaxing to get into a swimming pool. And the nice thing about being in the water is if you also have arthritis or back pain or something like that, the water helps support those joints. And so, people can work with, as part of a class, and do simple, calisthenic type exercises or stretching or hold the wall and do some kicks. And it gets you moving in a more gentle way. The term, whether you call it aerobics or water therapy, I think probably depends on the setting. I know that not too many physical therapy groups offer that. Specifically, they don't have a pool of water in their facility. Yeah, it's usually through a gym or a rec center. I think depression is something you should mention to either your primary, you should discuss it with both, your primary and your Parkinson's specialist. I think both types of doctors have different familiarities as individuals with treating depression. But I think, you should advocate for yourself, and also your spouse should advocate and say, make sure that one or the other feels comfortable in addressing it. I think I may have depression. Do you feel comfortable addressing it? And if they say, oh yeah, if they feel comfortable addressing that, then you can pursue a plan of treatment through them. Sometimes some doctors don't. Some docs say, well, I don't know enough about that, or your depression seems really complicated. I might refer you to a specialist. But if you get the feeling that your neurologist is sort of like kind of maybe not, doesn't want or doesn't feel like they have a good handle on it, and your primary care, you may ask for a subspecialty referral. So a psychiatry referral is always fair. Frustration, that's a good question. So frustration is a common experience for many people with Parkinson's, and some people find that, you know, I try to do something and I'm not able to do it at the level that I want, and so then I sort of, it's a defeating feeling. It's a feeling that why bother? And this we see, you know, we can see it in things like hobbies, we can see it in things like socialization. Oh, you know, I like to knit, but my knitting doesn't come out as good. I like to meet with friends, but I find that it's hard for them to hear me because my voice volume is lower, or daily activities. I think part of the importance, one of the important things to do there is to change your expectations. So I know some patients who are perfectionists, and they want to function at exactly the level they had before they had Parkinson's disease. And so while that's a nice motivator in some ways, sometimes that can hurt you. If you're not able to meet that, you just beat yourself up for not getting it exactly right, and then you stop trying. And then, you know, so I think in that setting, it's nice for family members to also sort of rally around and to talk about, well, look, you know, the same thing holds with people just getting older. You're just not going to be on your A game just from getting older, and so you're going to take longer to do things. You're going to be less efficient. Your results at the hobby that you have are not going to be what they used to be. But the important thing is keep doing it, because that's a part of you. And you know, give yourself a sense of humor and allow yourself to just not be as good at it. That's, you know, I know there's more to it than just that, because there are some people who are so disabled that they just can't do it, period, which is very frustrating, and I realize that. So there's a few good questions there, and I'll try to remember them all. First, sleepiness and fatigue, are they cyclical in Parkinson's? Depends on the person. So if your fatigue is cyclical, it might be related to a sleep issue or a medication issue. But I know plenty of people who just say they're just uniformly fatigued from when they wake up to when they go to bed. The second question was about levodopa. The easier one is, well, body size. Does body size affect how much levodopa you need? Not as much as we would think. So we don't have a huge difference in how we dose levodopa between somebody who's very heavy and someone who's very thin. The third part is how do you suspect that? What if the levodopa might be causing the fatigue? And it's possible. Levodopa typically does not cause. When a minority of individuals notice that when they take their carbidopa, levodopa, or other Parkinson's medicine, that they, you know, the first hour or two, maybe after taking it, or first half an hour, they just feel worse. And it's possible that there is an immediate effect of the medication hitting your bloodstream that causes a dizziness or a sleepiness. Sometimes it goes with other symptoms like nausea. And that would be one way to try to tell. I think if you had a fatigue that was kind of uniform throughout the day, it's probably less likely to be related to the levodopa. Other questions? Okay. Thank you all. It's a pleasure being here.